Senator Ted Cruz and a couple of other lawmakers have come together recently to try to proclaim June as the national month of focus on the sanctity of human life. And that is because it was during the month of June 3 years ago that the Dobbs decision was handed down that overturned Roe v. Wade. We want to talk today about how that is impacting states and how it's impacting the outlook of other nations on abortion.
Hey, Mark, it's good to be with you again today.
John, good to see you.
This month, we're going to mark the third anniversary of the U.S. Supreme Court Dobbs decision, which is really a major decision for the cause of life. And I'm just wondering, Mark, we should talk about that a little bit, and maybe we could start off by you summarizing a little bit about what that decision was all about.
Yeah, that was a tremendous decision because for almost 50 years we had Roe versus Wade in the United States that at the federal level essentially gave the right to an abortion to just about anybody who felt like they needed one for pretty much any reason. It wasn't exactly worded that way, but the way it was worded left it enough wiggle room, if you will, for those who wanted abortion rights to be able to come up with a reason to have abortion for just about any reason. Now, the Dobbs versus Jackson, Mississippi, the Jackson Women's Health Organization, that was the decision that in a split decision, it was 6-3, split decision on the Supreme Court of the United States that went back and analyzed, basically what it did was it analyzed the constitutionality of Mississippi's gestational act that was on the books, banning pregnancy after 15 weeks of gestation.
Banning pregnancy?
I'm sorry, banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah. Banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And it upheld that law, saying that Mississippi had the right to that in their state constitution, which gave way for them to be able to go back and kind of review how that related to Roe versus Wade. And they ended up analyzing Roe versus Wade again. That was a little bit of a tighter decision, but in a 5-4 decision, they overturned this 50 years of precedent toward basically legalized abortion on demand in the United States.
Okay, so Dobbs ended Roe 3 years ago.
It did.
Now, lots of people are going to think that that means that abortion was ended, but obviously it didn't. It simply made the battle over the life issue, the sacredness of life, a battle among 50 different states rather than a federal law that stopped all the states from passing laws.
Exactly.
So
it basically put the power back in the hands of people in the form of giving it to states where elected officials and elections it influenced whether or not the people of that state felt like it was the right thing for their state to do. So it did not overturn the right to an abortion so much as it gave people the voice at the state level to decide what they wanted to do as a group of people.
That's right. Because I was in this room when I heard the news and almost began to weep because so many of us in the pro-life movement have been in it for 35 years more. You know, this was a milestone moment for us, but we recognized that it didn't end the battle. It just changed the nature of the battle.
That's exactly right.
It's going to be 50 states battle now, and I remember reading both decisions, Mark. I read Roe v. Wade many years ago.
Yes.
It's the most convoluted, difficult to understand decision, and I think very intentional because they were trying to find a right of abortion in a document that didn't mention abortion or anything close to it.
Exactly.
So they ended up finding it in the spirit of the thing or the penumbra of the thing, and of course that's hard to do. So they used highly elevated academic language to basically find something and to persuade people that it was there when it wasn't there.
Exactly.
When you read the Dobbs decision,
it's just the opposite.
it's clear, it's logical, it appeals to logic, it appeals to reason, it appeals to history, it appeals to the fact that women in crisis today do have help and resources in the pregnancy help centers across the country. It just reads very clear and simple. And I just would challenge anybody, go ahead and read both decisions, and you'll see that one is trying to cloud the moral clarity, and the other one is trying to make it clear.
Yes.
And turn it back to the states as a battle. It's quite a stunning contrast between the two.
It is. It's very, and it's quite telling in the fact that you've got this obfuscative language and you've got this clear language on the other side. It just makes it seem like those who are advocating for the right to abortion being found in the Constitution of the United States were playing sleight of hand.
Yeah. Well, tell us now, it's been 3 years.
So in those 3 years, John, the battle has begun now to shift to the state levels. And at this point in history, and this is the summer of 2025 that we're talking about, up till now, there have been 16 states that have gone back and put ballot measures on their November ballots to make decisions about abortion. 16 states have had those ballot initiatives brought up, and 13 of those states have upheld or even provided more liberal laws than were in place before, upholding the quote unquote the right to an abortion or reproductive health care. Meaning, for those of us on the pro-life side, it's been 13 losses at the state level. 3 states have actually had the ballot initiatives about abortion and have gone in the pro-life direction. So that would be Florida, Nebraska, and South Dakota. All just this past November, in November of 2024, had ballot initiatives that the people actually voted down and kept abortion more difficult to access, or kept abortion out of their state constitutions.
So in those 3 areas, abortion has been more restricted, and the others, they have been actually maintained or actually expanded. Like in California, New York,
Vermont,
places.
That's right. That's right. So again, it's been in some ways you can look at it as a string of legal losses for the pro-life side. It's not been a shutout, but the statistics have not been good for those of us who believe that life should be protected.
So my takeaway from that, Mark, really is a condemnation, really, of the state of the church today, and particularly her shepherds, because what the Constitution really did is it handed the decision back to the states or the people, like you say.
Right.
And as long as our shepherds continue to remain silent on this, thinking of it not as a biblical moral issue, the churches will not be rallied and summoned to defend the innocent the way that we should and have been in the past. It was, again, the moral clarity of the scriptures that so much prompted people to oppose slavery and join the abolition movement.
Yes.
And later on, the civil rights movement was all based on a Christian worldview on the value of human life and dignity and the equal value of human life and dignity.
Yes.
So the fact that our churches have remained silent and we've lost so many of these battles, I think is something that we have to give account for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And before we could just, pastors used to invite me to speak in their churches. I think in part because they knew that nothing was ever going to change because of Roe v. Wade being in place. And now I get fewer invitations, and I think it's because the battle's really on, and we are really morally responsible for what's happening in our neighborhood and in our state today.
Yeah. So why would that, just to clarify the issue, why do you think that means you're getting fewer invitations than you were getting before? Now that the battle is on, why are you getting fewer invitations?
I think it's revelation that pastors, many of them, are ruled by a spirit of fear and cowardice and don't really want to take a stand. And it was easy to say I'm pro-life when nothing could change. But now children are going to live or die based on what you say or don't say, and whether we rally people or whether you take the slings and arrows of people accusing you of being political when we're really we're just defending the innocent as the scriptures call us to do.
Exactly right.
So I just think that there's so much work to do in the States, even though, there's a data point in all this that's really changed my own focus from the States to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And here it is. When you ask the question, what percentage of abortion happens in the United States, abortion from around the world on an annual basis, the answer is less than 3%.
Yeah.
So 97% of the moral crisis of abortion really is a world missions challenge. And so while we've got a battle here to fight in the States, and I think it falls particularly for us as Christians to stand and be counted here.
Right.
We've got an even greater battle around the world to stand for life.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me how you think that is affecting what's going on with both what PassionLife is doing and how these laws like Roe versus Wade and the Dobbs decision are affecting other countries as they look in from the outside. Obviously we have a lot of influence in various places around the world. How's it impacted the mission scene?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that the United States is still very influential, and the fact that we have tossed the issue of abortion back to the States and made it a battle for the people to decide does ripple out to other places. But those who advocate for legal abortion, they also have a mission field. And if I can show you this map here, this first map that I'm going to show you is a map that shows where abortion is most restricted in the blue.
Yep.
And where abortion is most advocated or protected in law in the blue, and then more restricted more in the yellow, orange, red colors, okay?
Yep.
And you can see that most of the existing pro-life laws that exist in the world today are in Africa, parts of the Middle East, and in Central and South America.
Right.
Now, if you look at the next map, it shows, and these are maps that are drawn by abortion advocates
at
the Guttmacher Institute, okay?
Right.
The next map shows where the most recent liberalizing laws expanding abortion rights have taken place in recent years. And you'll see that it's the same two spots. It's basically Africa and Central America, South America.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, these are the places that we would look to as the defenders of life. But on the other hand, they're also the target of much of the global effort to continue to expand and legalize abortion in those countries. So that's their own mission field.
That's right. There's no coincidence in the fact that abortion is on the rise in the conservative areas. It's because that's where the money and the legal pressure is going.
That's right. So there are lots of pressures to expand these laws. The United States and its different organizations have tried until recently to get a lot of billions of dollars in aid on condition that the laws are changed to support abortion.
Exactly.
So it's affected me directly, and it's affected PassionLife directly, because we primarily were looking at countries where abortion was most concentrated and abortion most available, okay? But then we began to realize that we also need to defend or help those countries, the churches in those countries where they have some pro-life laws still on the book, rise and defend those laws before they lose the ball.
Exactly. Some people have asked me, I've actually had one person that asked me, why would Passion Life go to Honduras when Honduras is one of the most conservative places on the planet as far as abortion laws go? And that is because Honduras is directly in the crosshairs of those globalist powers that are looking to influence countries all throughout Latin America who have what they consider to be an imbalance in the availability of reproductive rights, which means it's a euphemism for they don't have enough abortions for our tastes.
Exactly.
So that puts Honduras actually back in our court as a place where we can go and partner with the church to help them hold the ground that they have as the tsunami of pressure is coming for them in coming months and years.
That's right. That's right. If we do not help the churches in these areas throughout Central America and South America
and Africa,
they're going to lose all their protections very, very quickly over the next several years, as we've seen them lose those protections over the last several years. And Mark, when we come back, maybe we can talk about one example, one country that we chose 6 or 7 years ago to go and see if we could help, and that was in Colombia. I think that's a story worth telling to see how the church is responding, even though they've lost some protections, how the church is responding, and how we all can be a part of pro-life world missions.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? Passion Life, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
We've received a really overwhelming and wonderful response to this tiny baby fetal model that we've developed here in Passion Life. This fetal model is a medically accurate representation from the 9th week after conception. If you go to our website, we've got a way for you to not only send those tiny babies around the world, but find out a way that you can have some of those tiny babies come to you for your own use as well.
So, Mark, 3 years ago, we had the Dobbs decision that came down in June of 2022. Now, the sad news is that just a few months before this, the country of Colombia in Latin America, they had a Supreme Court decision that I would call the Roe v. Wade decision of Colombia that's quite tragic. And I think it reflects the challenge that we face here as Christians today, bringing the cause of life to more and more places around the world, like Colombia, before it's too late. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in the spring?
I very clearly remember that we could see this coming, and it was part of why we got active in Colombia in 2019 and 20 and 21. We were going there. We could see that they were moving toward some sort of flashpoint on abortion in their country because they were conservative, among the more conservative countries in all of Latin America on the topic of abortion. And they had, again, this was kind of their version of the Supreme Court they called the Colombian Constitutional Court, which also is a 9-member court like our Supreme Court. And in a 5-4 split decision in February of 2022, they basically decided that abortion would no longer be criminalized. They would decriminalize abortion up to 24 weeks, which is more or less considered the age of viability outside of the womb.
Which is, again, a very diabolical, I would almost say. Just like Roe v. Wade was written to confuse and distort and deceive, to say that we're going to decriminalize something.
Exactly.
Allow them to stop short of saying that abortion is right or wrong. They just want to neutralize it.
Exactly. They're just neutering the wording, if you will.
So they don't have to change the laws that protect human life. They just took away all the punishments,
all the penalties for having an abortion,
breaking the law.
Right. There's no there's no crime, there's no laws being broken if you decide to have an abortion for just about any reason in Colombia. In fact, I stumbled upon this NPR story online where you can clearly see here that they're basically saying that Colombia went from the country in Latin America that was one of the most conservative to now being among the most liberal abortion states, abortion countries in all of Latin America, which is really just astounding. And we saw this coming, but as you said, we didn't get started early enough standing with the church to help them get ready for this.
Yeah, so we went down to Colombia. We met with some people at a seminary in outside of Medellin.
Yep.
We started to build some relationships with some church leaders in Bogota, and we felt an urgency to try to train the church, starting with her leaders, to think biblically about the sanctity of human life and the shedding of innocent blood, and seeing abortion as an entry point to offer people forgiveness and freedom from the past.
Yes.
And then to hear this call to answer this call to rescue the innocent,
Right.
Proverbs 24:11. We began all that at the seminary. It took us a while to meet the right people and to get organized, and it broke my heart.
Yep.
That this law was passed before a significant alarm could be raised, and this discipling of God's people in Colombia could reach the standing point where they could push back and hold fast to the laws that were there. Very
Exactly.
tragic.
It was tragic. Again, going back to this NPR story, you see the picture here. You've got these really, really happy pro-abortion activists in the street. They're carrying green umbrellas and they're throwing green powder up in the air, and they're wearing green shirts, and they're saying, even in this article, that this touched off what they're calling a green wave that continues to spread throughout Latin America. Now, it's interesting because when we started Passion Life a number of years ago, we chose green for our color, for our logo originally. And we rebranded everything into Spanish, and we obtained the domain name passionvida.org for the Spanish website. Quickly realized we needed to get away from green and go to something other, like blue is what we ended up choosing. All of our work in Latin America has to be branded in blue because green is the color of pro-abortion for Latin America. So you've got this green wave that took off right around the time that America was about to implement more freedoms for people to have a say in abortion law rather than just have it mandated and dictated to us from the federal level.
Yeah. So here's where we are today. I see that the church, and again, I turn to her leaders, who God appointed pastors and leaders to lead.
Sure.
And what we desperately need today is pastors who can lead well on abortion rather than remain silent. We need it here in the States now, and we need it all over the world in places like Colombia. So accepting that challenge, and me being a pastor, you being a pastor, we wanted to reach our own, our own peers down there.
That's right.
And we finally got to the point a couple of years ago where we had a very, very significant training in the three largest cities in Colombia. Mm-hmm. It was in Bogota, Medellin, and Cali, sort of the drug capitals, so to speak, of the area. But the church is strong there, and they really received this message. And we ended up teaching about 200 pastors during that trip. And they themselves, I remember being in Bogota where the pastors stood up and started talking to each other, and they got out a marker and they started marking on the board how many other pastors are they going to teach within their church network of churches, whether it was Baptist or Assemblies of God or whatever, and in one city to another. And they made a commitment to each other to go out and train 184,000, some odd number of other believers within the next 4 weeks, learning the biblical ethics what we call the 4 questions to these other churches. And then later on, they doubled that again, and they went out to try to reach about 380,000 more people in a bunch of other cities. So the church in Colombia is to be commended, and her leaders particularly, because ever since then, they've been teaching these 4 questions all throughout the country of Colombia.
That's what strong leadership does, is it coalesces around something really, really important, like the moral value of human life, and it says we're going to dig in on this, and we're going to put our collaborative effort together. And we've seen real change. We've seen several pregnancy help centers opened in the country of Colombia. We've seen other related works that have been either started or strengthened, like mothers' homes and things like that, support for women who are in crisis pregnancy situations. So it really has been fascinating to watch how the country of Colombia has really responded, and the leaders especially have responded. Now that their eyes were open, they realized, whoops, we should have been talking about this, but at least they're talking about it now.
That's right. Yeah, I remember one training that we were in together. I forget what city it was in, Mark, but remember, this was a gathering of pastors and leaders of the pastors. And I remember that one key pastor who is highly respected among all the pastors.
Yes.
He stood up and he began to weep openly in front of all of his peers. He said because he recognized that we share in blood guilt if we intentionally kill an innocent human being, including those in the womb, or if we close our eyes to it and say nothing about it. And this poor brother, he just wept and sobbed. And some of the other pastors actually got up and held on to him.
That's right.
While he was sobbing. And it created a spirit of repentance among that audience.
It swept through the whole room.
And it's reverberating even today, so that you've got pregnancy centers starting in Tunjas and in Bogota, Medellin, all these different wonderful good works coming out of those tears of repentance.
Yeah, it's very touching. John, we ended up going back and just realizing that it was worthwhile to help people understand what had happened in Colombia by doing sort of a longer term study on Colombia. Do you want to tell our viewers about that?
Well, we actually hired some people to do a third-party impact study and to evaluate the impact of these 4 questions, which you can get online at PassionLife.org. And then they produced a 17-page study that you can now get, or a 2-page summary at our website at PassionLife.org. But I really would strongly encourage you as a listener to learn those 4 questions, ask those 4 questions, and then read this study and get a vision for what everyday people in the churches under the leadership of humble but strong and direct pastoral leadership can start to produce in their own neighborhoods and then eventually in their country. So go to PassionLife.org and download the impact study on Colombia, and you will be strongly encouraged and challenged.